Have you ever looked in the mirror and noticed a new wrinkle, or felt a little slower getting up in the morning and thought, is this what aging is supposed to feel like? Maybe you've even caught yourself saying, I'm not as young as I used to be, with a sigh. But here's the thing. What if I told you that aging doesn't have to mean losing your spark? That in fact, this stage of life can be one of the most fulfilling, joyful, and self-loving times you've ever experienced? The secret? Learning how to love yourself, really love yourself, more as you age. Not in spite of the changes, but because of them. Because every laugh line, every silver hair, every experience you've lived through has shaped who you are today. And that person is worth celebrating. So if you've ever felt invisible, overlooked, or just a little too hard on yourself, this video is for you. We're going to talk about simple, powerful ways to embrace yourself fully, to treat yourself with kindness, and to find joy in who you are, right here, right now, because you deserve that love no matter your age. Let's start with something that might surprise you, the way you talk to yourself. Have you ever paid attention to the little voice in your head? The one that says, I'm too old for this, or I should have done better, or I don't look the way I used to. That voice. It shapes how you feel about yourself more than you might realize. Imagine if a dear friend came to you, worried about their age or their mistakes. Would you say to them, you're right, you're past your prime? Of course not. You'd remind them of their strength, their wisdom, their worth. So why don't we do that for ourselves? Here's a small but life-changing habit. Start replacing those critical thoughts with kinder ones. When you catch yourself thinking, I'm not as sharp as I used to be, pause and say instead, I've learned so much in my life, and I'm still learning. Or when you see your reflection and focus on the changes, try shifting to, this face has smiled through decades of love and laughter. It might feel strange at first, but over time, it rewires how you see yourself. And speaking of how you see yourself, let's talk about comparison. It's so easy to look at others, especially younger people, and think, I wish I had their energy, their opportunities, their whatever it may be. But comparison is a thief. It steals the joy of your own unique journey. The truth? No one has lived your life. No one has your stories, your resilience, your heart. So why measure yourself against someone else's chapter when you're in a completely different book? Instead, try this. Focus on gratitude for what your body and mind have done for you. Maybe your knees aren't what they used to be, but think of all the places they've carried you, through work, through adventures, through life. Maybe your memory isn't as quick, but think of all the wisdom you've stored up over the years. Aging isn't losing, it's gaining. Gaining experience, gaining perspective, gaining the freedom to finally put yourself first. And that brings us to our next point. Making time for what brings you joy. So often we spend our younger years meeting obligations, raising families, building careers, taking care of others. But now is the time to ask yourself, what do I love? What makes me happy? Maybe it's gardening or painting, or finally taking that dance class you've always thought about. Maybe it's simply sitting with a good book and no guilt about wasting time. Whatever it is, give yourself permission to do it. Not because it's productive, but because it lights you up inside. Because here's the beautiful truth. Loving yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. When you fill your own cup, you have so much more to give to others. Not from obligation, but from overflow. And that's where we'll pick up next time, because there's so much more to explore about embracing this chapter of life with open arms. For now, I'd love to hear from you. What's one small way you've learned to be kinder to yourself as you've gotten older? Share it in the comments. You might just inspire someone else. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Until then, remember, you are worthy of your own love, exactly as you are. You know, there's a question I love to ask people, especially those in their 60s, 70s, and beyond. If you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be? And do you know what the most common answer is? I'd tell myself to stop worrying so much about what other people think. Isn't that something? All those years spent trying to meet expectations, other people's, society's, even our own impossibly high standards, only to realize later that the real freedom comes when we finally give ourselves permission to just be. I remember talking to a woman named Margaret a few months ago. She's 72, and she told me that she spent most of her life being the yes person, the one who always showed up, who never complained, who put everyone else's needs before her own. And then one day, after a minor health scare, she realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd done something just because it made her happy. Not because it was expected of her, not because it checked some invisible box of being good or being useful, just because it brought her joy. That realization hit her like a ton of bricks, and it changed everything for her. That's what we're going to talk about today, how to let go of those old pressures and truly embrace the freedom that comes with aging. Because loving yourself isn't just about positive thoughts or treating yourself now and then. It's about creating a life that feels good to you on your terms. And that starts with something many of us struggle with: setting boundaries. Think about it. How often have you said yes when you really wanted to say no? Maybe it was to a social event you didn't have the energy for, or a favor that left you feeling drained. We're often taught that saying no is rude or selfish, especially as we get older and feel like we should be helpful or available. But here's the truth. Every time you say yes to something that doesn't serve you, you're saying no to yourself, to your peace, to your joy, and you deserve so much more than that. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I had a friend, let's call her Carol, who was constantly babysitting her grandkids, even when she was exhausted. She loved them dearly, but she was running on empty. One day, her daughter asked her to take the kids for the weekend, and Carol, without even thinking, said yes. But that night she couldn't sleep. She was dreading the weekend, feeling resentful, and then guilty for feeling that way. Sound familiar? Finally, she called her daughter back and said, "You know what? I need to take a rain check this weekend. I'm just not up for it." And guess what? Her daughter said, "Of course, Mom. I should have asked if you were feeling okay first." That simple no didn't just give Carol her weekend back. It taught her that her needs mattered, that she didn't have to earn her place in her family's life by always being the dependable one. And over time, it changed their whole dynamic. Her daughter started checking in with her first, and Carol felt more valued than ever, not for what she could do, but for who she was. So how do you start setting boundaries like Carol did? It's simpler than you might think. Begin with small, low-stakes moments. Maybe it's telling a friend, "I'd love to see you, but let's make it a shorter visit this time. I need to rest." Or saying to a family member, "I'm happy to help, but this is all I can do right now." It might feel uncomfortable at first, but with practice it becomes liberating. And the people who truly care about you, they'll respect it. In fact, they might even admire you for it. Now, let's talk about another big piece of self-love, redefining what purpose means at this stage of life. For so long, many of us tied our worth to what we did, our jobs, our roles as parents or caregivers. But when those roles shift or fade, it's easy to feel lost, like we don't matter as much anymore. But that's just not true. Purpose isn't something you lose with age, it's something you get to redefine. Take my neighbor, Frank. He retired at 65 after decades as a school principal. At first, he loved the freedom, sleeping in, traveling, finally having time for his garden. But after a few months, he started feeling adrift. He missed the structure, the sense of contributing. One day, he volunteered to tutor a struggling student at the local library. It was just 1 hour a week, but it gave him that spark again. He wasn't Principal Frank anymore. He was just Frank, sharing his love of learning with a kid who needed help. And that, for him, became a new kind of purpose. Your purpose now might look completely different. Maybe it's to enjoy life in a way you never had time for before. To explore hobbies you've always been curious about. To share your wisdom with others, not because you have to, but because you want to. Or maybe it's simply to savor quiet mornings, to appreciate the small moments, to live at a pace that feels right for you. There's no wrong answer here. The key is to ask yourself, what makes me feel alive? And then give yourself permission to pursue it without guilt. And while we're on the topic of guilt, let's talk about self-care. Not the bubble bath and face mask kind, though if that's your thing, go for it! But the kind that truly nourishes you. For some, that might mean finally prioritizing sleep instead of pushing through exhaustion. For others, it could be saying no to a diet mentality and enjoying food without shame. Or maybe it's allowing yourself to rest without feeling lazy. Because here's the thing. Your body has carried you through decades of life. It doesn't need punishing. It deserves gratitude and care. I'll never forget a letter I got from a viewer named Helen. She wrote, "For years I beat myself up about gaining weight. I tried every diet, hated my reflection, and felt like I'd failed at aging gracefully. Then one day, my granddaughter hugged me and said, 'Grandma, you're so soft and cozy.' And it hit me. My body isn't a project to fix. It's the home that's held me through love, loss, and everything in between. Now I move because it feels good, not to shrink myself. I eat cake at birthdays, and I finally feel free." Helen's story reminds me of something my own grandmother used to say. You don't have to earn the right to take up space in this world. What would it feel like to truly believe that? To treat yourself with the same kindness you'd show a dear friend? One of the most powerful ways to practice this kind of self-care is through movement. Not as a way to fix yourself, but as a way to celebrate what your body can still do. Maybe it's a gentle walk in the park, feeling the sun on your face, or stretching to your favorite music just because it feels good. Movement isn't about burning calories or chasing youth. It's about honoring the vessel that's brought you this far. I think of my friend Roberto, who took up Tai Chi in his late 60s after a hip replacement. At first, he was frustrated. He'd been a runner his whole life, and this felt too slow. But over time, he came to love the slowness, the way it made him tune into his body's rhythms. Now at 75, he says it's not just exercise, it's meditation in motion. And that shift in perspective changed everything for him. And finally, let's talk about something that might feel a little uncomfortable at first. Embracing your age instead of resisting it. So many of us fight the natural process of aging, dyeing our hair, hiding our wrinkles, pretending we're not slowing down. But what if we shifted that energy? What if, instead of seeing aging as decline, we saw it as an accomplishment? Every year is a testament to your resilience. Every gray hair is a badge of wisdom. Every laugh line tells a story. When you stop fighting your age, you free up so much energy. Energy you can use to enjoy the life you've worked so hard to create. I'll leave you with this. A few months ago, I met a woman named Eleanor at a community center. She was 82, vibrant as could be, with silver hair she'd stopped dyeing years ago. When I complimented her on it, she laughed and said, "Honey, I've earned every one of these stripes." That's the energy I want for all of us. Not just accepting aging, but owning it. Because every year is proof that you've lived, loved, and survived things you never thought you could. So here's my challenge to you this week. Pick one area where you can start loving yourself a little more. Maybe it's saying no to something that drains you. Maybe it's trying a new hobby just for fun. Or maybe it's simply looking in the mirror and saying, "I'm proud of you." Because the more you practice these small acts of self-love, the more natural they'll feel. And that's where we'll pick up next time, as we dive into the final piece of this journey. How to surround yourself with joy, cultivate gratitude, and truly thrive in this chapter of life. In the meantime, I'd love to hear from you. What's one boundary you've set, or want to set, that's helped you love yourself more? Share it in the comments below. And if this video resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more conversations like this. Remember, you're not just aging, you're evolving, and that's something to celebrate. Do you remember the first time you realized that life wasn't about reaching some final destination? That moment when it dawned on you, maybe slowly, maybe all at once, that the joy was in the journey itself? For me, it was watching my grandmother knead bread dough when I was about 12. I asked her why she didn't just buy bread from the store to save time, and she laughed that wonderful laugh of hers and said, "Child, what would I be saving time for? This is the good part right here. That wisdom, that understanding that the ordinary moments are actually the extraordinary ones, is one of the greatest gifts that comes with aging. And it's at the heart of what we're going to explore today in this final part of our series on loving yourself more as you age. Because after we've learned to set boundaries, redefine purpose, and care for our changing bodies, what remains is perhaps the most beautiful part of all, the art of savoring. Let's talk first about gratitude, not as some vague concept we're told to practice, but as a radical way of seeing the world. Research shows that people who practice gratitude regularly experience less pain, sleep better, and even have stronger immune systems. But beyond the science, gratitude changes how we experience our lives day to day. I want to share a story about my friend Martin. At 78, he started what he called his gratitude jar. Every evening, he'd write one thing he was grateful for on a slip of paper and drop it in. Some days it was big things like his granddaughter's graduation. Other days it was tiny moments, the way sunlight came through his kitchen window in the afternoon, or how his old dog still got excited when he came home. After a year, he had 365 slips of paper. On New Year's Eve, he sat by his fireplace and read every single one. He told me later that going through those memories was like rewatching the movie of his year, but only the very best scenes. What Martin discovered was something profound. That gratitude isn't just about appreciating what we have. It's about training ourselves to notice the goodness that's already there. And here's the beautiful part. This practice actually rewires our brains to look for the positive. Scientists call it the neuroplasticity of gratitude. The more we practice it, the more naturally it comes to us. This brings me to something equally important: the people who help us see our own worth. As we get older, our social circles often get smaller. But here's the truth. Quality matters far more than quantity when it comes to relationships. Think about the people in your life who make you feel truly seen, not for what you can do for them, but for who you are at your core. Those are your soul nourishers. There's a wonderful study from Harvard that followed people for nearly 80 years, and you know what they found? The single biggest predictor of happiness and health in old age wasn't wealth or fame or even genes. It was the quality of people's relationships. Good relationships don't just protect our bodies, they protect our brains. People with strong social connections experience slower memory decline and live longer, happier lives. But here's what I really want you to hear. It's never too late to deepen connections or make new ones. My neighbor Evelyn lost her husband 5 years ago and told me she worried she'd never have that kind of closeness again. Then she joined a memoir writing group at her local library. At first, she went just to pass the time. But as she and the other women shared their stories, really shared them, something remarkable happened. They became what Evelyn calls her tribe of wise women. Now, in their 70s and 80s, they travel together, celebrate birthdays together, and perhaps most importantly, they remind each other daily of their worth. Which brings me to another powerful tool for self-love: legacy. Now, when we hear that word, we might think of wills or inheritances, but I'm talking about a different kind of legacy: the intangible gifts we leave behind through our stories, our wisdom, and the love we've shared. Consider this. You are the only person alive who has lived your exact life. Your experiences, your perspective, your hard-won wisdom, these are treasures that deserve to be preserved. And I'm not just talking about writing memoirs, though that's wonderful if you're so inclined. Your legacy lives in the recipes you pass down, the family stories you tell, the way you made people feel when they were with you. I'll never forget meeting a man named Henry at a senior center where I used to volunteer. Henry was 92 and had been a barber for 60 years. Every Tuesday, he'd come in with his old scissors and give free haircuts to anyone who wanted one. But here's the magic. As he cut hair, he'd tell stories about the neighborhood as it used to be, about raising his kids, about losing his wife. The young people who came in would leave with more than a haircut. They'd leave with pieces of history they'd never find in books. That was Henry's legacy. Not just the haircuts, but the living history he kept alive through his stories. What might your legacy look like? Maybe it's teaching your grandchild how to bake your famous apple pie. Maybe it's volunteering somewhere that needs your particular skills. Or maybe it's simply being the person in your family who remembers all the old stories and tells them with love. These things matter more than we often realize in the moment. Now let's talk about something we don't discuss often enough: the freedom that comes with aging. There's a wonderful quote by the writer Florida Scott Maxwell that goes, "You need only claim the events of your life to make yourself yours. When you truly possess all you have been and done, you are fierce with reality." What does it mean to be fierce with reality? I think it means finally being able to say, "This is me, all of me," and that's enough. As we get older, we often become more comfortable in our own skin. The opinions of others matter less. The need to prove ourselves fades. We start to understand what really matters and what doesn't. This is an incredible gift if we allow ourselves to receive it. I think of my Aunt Rose, who at 85 decided to take up painting. She'd never considered herself artistic, but one day she just bought some brushes and started. When someone asked her why she was starting so late, she said, "Late for what? I'm not trying to be famous, I'm trying to be happy." That simple shift from doing things for external validation to doing them for pure joy is one of the most liberating parts of growing older. And this brings us to perhaps the most important point of all: the idea that self-love isn't selfish. It's sacred. When we care for ourselves, truly care, we're better able to care for others. When we accept ourselves, we teach others by example that they too are worthy of acceptance. When we honor our needs, we give permission to those around us to do the same. I want to leave you with one last story. There was a woman named Sarah who came to one of my workshops last year. At 72, she told me she'd spent her whole life waiting. Waiting to be thin enough, waiting to be successful enough, waiting to feel ready. Then one morning, she looked in the mirror and realized, this is it. This is my life happening right now. That day, she booked the trip to Italy she'd always dreamed of. Not when she lost 20 pounds, not when she had more money, but right then, exactly as she was. When she came back, she told me, "I realized I wasn't waiting for my life to begin. I was living it all along. I just needed to open my eyes." That's my hope for all of us, that we stop waiting and start living, that we stop postponing joy until some imaginary future when everything is perfect, that we understand that loving ourselves isn't a destination. It's a daily practice, a series of small choices to treat ourselves with the same kindness we so freely give to others. As we close this series, I want to thank you for being here, for showing up for yourself in this way. Because that's what this is really about. Showing up, again and again, for the incredible person you are right now. Not the person you used to be, not the person you might become, but you, exactly as you are in this moment. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What's one small way you'll practice self-love this week? What wisdom about aging would you pass on to younger generations? Your stories inspire me more than you know. If this series has meant something to you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. But more importantly, take one thing you've learned here and try it today. Not tomorrow. Today. Because you, yes you, are worth that love right now. Until next time, remember what the poet Mary Oliver wrote. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? However you answer that question, may it be with kindness, with courage, and most of all, with love. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What's one small change you'll make to love yourself more this week? What wisdom about aging would you pass on to younger generations? Your stories and experiences inspire all of us more than you know. And if this video resonated with you, Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt conversations about living your best life at any age. Your support helps us create more content that matters to you and to others on this journey. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, no matter your age, no matter your story, you are worthy of love exactly as you are. Here's to embracing each day with kindness, courage, and the deep knowing that your life, your one wild and precious life, is still unfolding in beautiful ways. Take care of that wonderful heart of yours, and I'll see you in the next video.